You might be rate locked. You've got this great house that you have a great interest rate. You're going to rent it out and buy a new one. Well, what's the process of renting it out? How do you collect the rents? What's the difference between renting it out on your own or getting an apartment manager? We're going to talk about all of that and more in today's video. My name is Peter Lindquist. I'm with the Lindquist team, and I'm here with Travis Anderson, and not only an expert realtor, but an expert landlord for many years, and he's going to walk us through all of that stuff. Hey, if you like today's video, would you do me a favor and give it a thumbs up? And if you've got any questions whatsoever, leave them in the comments below, and please consider subscribing to the channel. With that, let's go ahead and get going. Hey, Travis, we're talking about the seller who is going to rent out their old house, buy a new one. I think some of them have no experience renting out their old house. So I want this conversation to be about that to help them understand. There's kind of two ways they can handle being a landlord. One is doing everything on their own. Another one is hiring a manager, right? So let's start with doing everything on your own. Have this house, and I want to rent it out. Tell me the process.
It's quite a lot, actually. You know, when I think back to it, I manage all of my own rental properties today. I think we have somewhere around 15 units. And so it's a decent amount of work, right? It's like a second job. And so you've got, of course, the management of the tenant, and then you have the management of the property. So those are kind of the two buckets there. And if we focus on the management of the tenant, you've got, marketing for a new tenant, screening the tenant, signing leases, and collecting checks. I think would probably be. I do use like background check services. There's a really good one in town. I think it's called Twin City Tenant Check. And so, yeah, once you have someone's driver's license and stuff like that, you send them this link. They pay to do their own background check, so you don't have to pay for the service or anything. And then you just get a report of their credit report and their background check. So that's a really good way to do it. Zillow has a pretty good service as well. I do lean on Zillow sometimes. They can also store leases, and they can help you create leases on Zillow. They've got a really good marketing platform too. So I do lean on Zillow's product a lot as well. So there's pretty good companies out there that you can use to kind of help screen tenants and even help market for new tenants. I would say that probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned is I do want to meet the tenant in person. There's something about that gut feeling that we have when we meet someone. It's really probably almost, I don't know the right way to say it, but it's a reality check for something. And if you get like a bad feeling, or if you think that they're not telling the truth or something like that, it's probably true. You do have to abide by obviously all of the laws and the rules and stuff like that. So you want to make sure that you're, not discriminating in any way and things like that. Obviously, as a licensed agent, I have to take applications in the order that I receive them. So if I receive 5 applications in one day, for example, I have to only review the first one that's received. I don't think that's true of unlicensed agents, but we should still abide by as much of that as possible.
What am I asking for from them? So I decide on this person. What do they need to give me?
We look for a couple of things. Usually we're pulling their credit. Again, you can use a service for that. Zillow, again, is a great one, or this Twin City Tenant Check is a good one. So you're going to pull their credit. You should already have in mind a minimum credit score requirement. And then that way, so long as they meet that requirement, you just move on to the next piece. But credit will be one. The background check would be another. And so they're going to have their driver's license or proof of identification, birth date, things like that. And again, they're submitting their information, but I do get a copy of their driver's license. And then there's usually some sort of a payment. And then the good programs will also require income verification. So again, Zillow actually has the tenant upload evidence of their income. Now you've got their credit report that has their debts, you've got their background check, and then you have their income. And we like to see their income about 3 times the rent or higher.
And then how much money are you getting from them?
In a perfect world, I would get first month's, last month's rent, and damage deposit. Quite a bit of money. Some of my rentals are $1,500, and so I'm collecting $4,500 from someone. That's a lot of money for some of these tenants. If I know it's a great tenant, their income works, their credit works, their background check came back, and they really want to rent for me, at a minimum, I need first month's rent and damage deposit, and then we can work in the last month's rent. So maybe we increase the monthly rent by $100, and now each month they're contributing to their last month's rent. Again, in a perfect world, if they have the money, I'll collect first month's, last month's, and damage deposit.
And then tell me about being a landlord from that point forward. So I've got my renter, they've moved in. Now, what are the pros and cons? What do I have to think about?
Lots to think about. Collecting rents, of course, is something to think about. I lean on Venmo, Apple Pay. Zillow actually has a service too, where you can take payment through Zillow. I generally am not doing cash. We've got one tenant that we've had for over a decade, and they still pay cash. I'm generally not doing that because I really want an easy record of the rental payment. So that's one piece of it. The lease agreement should have some language in there about having late payments and when you can start the eviction process. And mine begins on the fifth day of the month. So if you haven't made full payment by the fifth day, we can then begin the eviction process, at least per the contract. Usually, if a tenant's communicating really well with me, Peter, I won't do that, right? If they're really good at communicating and they tell me they're going to get me the payment on the 10th, then I'll take it on the 10th. If they're not communicating with me, there's usually an issue. They usually can't make that payment. They know they can't make the payment and they won't tell me about it. And so I will start that eviction process. And then in Minnesota, anyways, the eviction process can be fairly simple if you're not a corporation. Something you'll have to talk to an attorney about. But if you are a corporation, which everything that I own is in an LLC, I now am required to hire an attorney. And so that costs a little bit more money. So that's something to kind of think about. And then, of course, you're managing the property. Really good advice I got from someone way back when, Peter, is to either get like a home warranty or a service plan. Bond Fees used to have a service plan. XL Energy and Centerpoint Energy both have service plans that are pretty good. I like the service plans. I don't have them on every property, but on some of my properties, we pay a monthly fee. And in the event that something were to break, we just call XL Energy, for example. They run out there and they fix whatever is broken. If you're a handy person or something like that, you're going to be worried about toilets that break, and the most common things are just going to be toilets and like mechanical items breaking.
I can just hear some people like turning off the video right now and saying, "Wow, that sounds like a lot of work." Others that are like, "Oh, I can do that." Let's now talk about the person that says that sounds like a lot of work. What is the alternative to doing all of this on your own?
It is a lot of work no matter how you handle it. If you hire a management company, I still think it's a lot of work. If you don't hire a management company, I still think it's a lot of work. So when you hire a management company, they know the market rents really well. They can market the property for rent and they can screen your tenants. And I think that is worth every penny. And they're usually charging to fill a unit. They're usually charging 1 month's rent. 1 month's rent is a lot of money. So let's use $1,200 as an example. Let's say you have a lease for $1,200, you pay them $1,200 to fill the tenant. In my experience, they're able to get a little bit more rent to kind of cover that cost. If I ever hire a management company to fill a unit and I think the rent is $1,200, they're usually getting me $1,300 or $1,350. So it's worth every penny, in my opinion. As far as them actually managing the rents coming in and things like that, I have a hard time having somebody else manage that, because every time I've hired somebody to do it, I don't have a handle on when there's a late payment coming in. So I don't personally have a direct handle on when should I start the eviction process, because I've offloaded that to a management company. And unless we have exact expectations on how to handle that, I think they don't do it fast enough, in my opinion. I think if a tenant's not making the payment, I think you need to initiate the eviction process immediately, because otherwise they're going to do that as long as they can. Within the realms of the law, they're going to do it as long as they can, which is way longer than you would imagine it could be. So
does the apartment manager make the tough call? And by that, I mean, the client is 11 days late, and at this point it's like, I need my rent. I know for a lot of Minnesotans in particular, we're very polite, and so so that feels a little scary. Does the apartment manager do that for you?
Yeah. They're supposed to handle all of that. At some point, they can even do all of the eviction process. Most management companies have internal legal staff, and so they can, for a little bit cheaper. The last time I evicted somebody, it was like $1,600 for myself hiring an attorney, and that's just the attorney's cost, obviously. That didn't include like court fees and things like that. But a lot of these management companies, you might get a small discount on that. Maybe it's $1,200 or $1,400, something like that. In that scenario, I'm not quoting attorney's costs or anything. But yeah, they'll make that tough call. They'll make the tough call if that's something that we're worried about.
They're going to charge me how much in order to do this stuff?
I think the going rate is like 10% rent. Fairly affordable, right? Again, $1,200 a month. They're charging you $120 a month if the rent is $1,200. So I think it's fairly affordable. Where where I see the disconnect, again, I think they're great. This is personal opinion here. I think they're great filling the units. Once we start managing the unit, let's say your air conditioning goes out. Tenant calls the management company. Management company generally would send a technician out there to review it. So you've avoided, as a homeowner, you've avoided the call in, and you've avoided the call to a technician for sure. That technician goes out, looks at the AC unit, something ends up being wrong with it, whatever it is, and then the management company calls you. So now you've received a call, and then they discuss, all of the issues with the AC unit, what it would cost to get it fixed, etc. And then you give them sort of the go ahead to make it happen. So you're avoiding the call from the tenant. That's probably a good thing. You don't have to make the call to a service technician. Probably a good thing. Um, but then you still receive a call from someone to make the final decision, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're avoiding a little bit of a headache, but not much. It's not as much headache as you'd think, because you still have to be made aware of the issue. You still have to sign off on the repair and things like that. So again, I like having control over, this is just a personal preference, but I like having control over all of those expenses. So I generally am not sending, again, use this exact scenario. Let's say it's an AC unit. I'm usually not sending an HVAC technician out to look at the AC unit. I go out there personally myself, or I call a local handyman who I've built a relationship with to go take a look at it. Now I'm not paying nearly as much to get the work done. I have direct contact with the person that's doing it, usually built a relationship over time. And if they can make the repair, I can just get it done, right? Like a lot faster than I feel like the work gets done faster without a management company. And I feel like I have a little more leverage on it. But if we do want to be completely removed from talking to a tenant, which some people would, then you would want to hire a management company to handle that for you.
You said that it might cost around 10% of the rents, but you also said they tend to get a little bit more rent than if I'm renting it myself. Why is that?
They just know the market really well. I'm not sure if there's any other way to explain it. They understand the market rents better than I do. I'm even a licensed realtor, and I don't really. It's not the same as valuing a home for sale, right? And so they have a much better handle on it, mostly because they're managing multiple. I've got, like I said, I have 15 units. Call a management company, they've got thousands, right? So they just have a much better handle on the market rates.
And I think there's another factor, and that is, so I'm the homeowner. I know what the problems with the house are. And so I'm like, well, I know this thing doesn't work. And so I'm going to price it this way. It's something that happens just subconsciously in our head. You give it to somebody who's objective, they want to get as much as they can. And so that can end up happening. So the reason why I bring that up is that if one of the concerns you have is, hey, I don't want to pay this 10%, you'll probably make up some of that, if not all of it, based on what you do with the apartment management company. So we've covered really two big things. One is if I decide to rent out my home, no matter what I do, there is a significant amount of work to do. Whether I do all the work myself or I hire somebody to do it. I really think, though, it's important for us to remember, if we go back a couple videos, and we'll put a link in the description below, remember what you're getting, because the value is incredible. Would you agree that this is not a free lunch? It is worth the effort that we're putting into it because of the extraordinary return we're getting on it.
Yeah, as you were saying that, in my head, I was thinking there's no such thing as a free lunch. So it's actually very funny that you brought that up. I couldn't agree any more with you. I think it's exactly right. It's a decent amount of work. It's probably a little bit more work than you would expect. No matter which way you go. If you get a really good tenant, which I've had some really good tenants in my tenure here, and those properties, if I've got a good property and a good tenant, it's very little work generally as a landlord. Now, when something goes wrong, if it's a good tenant and something goes wrong, you want to try to fix that problem as soon as possible. As far as so there's that work involved, but as far as what's the benefit on the back end? That property I'm talking about, I own that one free and clear now, and so it is an associated maintained property, but most of the rent we're just putting in our pocket. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, and not to mention all the other advantages you mentioned. Be sure to watch, I think it was video number 2 in this series, so that you're weighing out the work that's involved and what the benefits to it are, because they're substantial. All right, Travis. Well, thanks for going through all of this with me today. You are really an expert in this field. Thanks for taking the time. And if you've got any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks.